So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the State of the School Address. First of all, I want to start by saying the two things that I hope you remember, if nothing else. First, how incredibly proud I am to continue to serve as dean of this amazing school with the people, and it's all about the people. It's the faculty, the staff, the students. You continue to inspire me every day. And the second thing to remember is I am so grateful. I'm so grateful for everything that you do day in and day out to make this institution what it is. It is always about the people, but sometimes we get a little lost in the weeds. So it's occasionally really important just to say the simple things. And so you don't have to remember anything else. And I hope this presentation is fun for us. We are entering, as many of you know, we're in the centennial year of the university. 100 years, and we're going to have sequential centennials now for the next couple of years, because a year after the draft for the school was in 1924, there was the draft for the School of Medicine in 1925, which also included plans for a School of Nursing and the health system, at the time a hospital, which became a health system. That's a really important fact, because from the very first day the plans for the School of Medicine were made, it was recognized that the school needed to be attached to a health delivery institution. And many institutions, that's not the case. So we're going to be celebrating that as well. And then we'll be celebrating when the first students came, when the first students graduated. But this is the beginning of our centennial. And that is going to be one of the themes that I bring today, which is really looking at our past. And I think you'll realize that from the very beginning, the principles of this school were established that persist today and that will inform us and take us into the future. Lots of other things have changed, and we are in a time of change, but the principles underlying an academic, research-intensive medical school associated with a health system started from day one and continue today, and we're going to celebrate that in many ways. But let's first start by celebrating our people. In my first couple of years I did this, I tried to pronounce a lot of names and recognize a lot of individuals that were given both internal and national recognition. You can't do it in several hours. So our team has put together a great video that highlights all the awards that our faculty and staff have received in the last year. And before I put that on, I want to recognize our communications team, our development team that have put all of this together. I just deliver it. So first, let's start with the video. What a remarkable group. So frankly, it's no surprise that we have so many high achievers in our community, and that has also been since the beginning of the school. In less than 100 years, we have started as a fairly new institution in 1925, and now have persisted over the course of those 100 years as a top academic, research-intensive medical school. We are young compared to our peers. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but we have led throughout the history of Duke. So our history looks good in most parts, but sometimes it's been challenging, and it's important that we learn both from the good as well as the more challenging moments. Each one of you have contributed significantly to our history. Some have been almost half of the history of Duke, which is pretty astounding. But each one of you have contributed and will contribute to the next chapter, the next 100 years of Duke and the School of Medicine. So I invite you to join me today to look at our missions over time, highlighting our remarkable accomplishments from our past, our present, and really thinking about how that informs our future. So this is in the spirit of celebrating that past and embracing our future. So let's start with our education programs. When James B. Duke created the university in 1924, he also made a bequest to establish a medical school and the hospital. So the three, the School of Medicine, the School of Nursing, and the hospital, were started together with the intention of improving healthcare in the Carolinas, which was largely rural at the time. When founding Dean Dr. Wilbur Davidson came on board, he emphasized experiential learning on the wards. That was quite novel at the time. He introduced the concept of bedside clinical teaching based on his own medical training at Oxford under Sir William Osler. Dr. Osler fondly called Dr. Davidson, quote, a new American colt who is wrecking medical school tradition. Dr. Davidson preferred to hire young physicians as faculty who were willing to try new things. So from the beginning, the School of Medicine was considered disruption of tradition. Less than 5 years after the school opened, the Association of American Medical Colleges ranked it among the top 25% of all the existing medical schools. We've never fell out of that ranking, and obviously now have been in the top 10% for many years. We have really worked hard at maintaining that position of prominence. From our founding, the School of Medicine set out not only to educate doctors, but also to create leaders in science and medicine. So looking at the trajectory, we need to look at some of the early students. Jay Arena was a member of the Duke University School of Medicine very first class. He was a preeminent pediatrician and a faculty member. In the 1950s, he led the push for drug companies to develop the childproof safety cap for medicine bottles. A major success was in the safety closure of children's aspirin. He helped bring about a reduction in the strength of aspirin as well as the number of tablets per bottle, ultimately reducing the percent of poisonings from aspirin from 25% to 5%, a remarkable impact. Dr. Arena's interest in poison prevention was due in part to the influence of Dr. Wilbur Davidson, the first dean. During the 1930s, the two men treated children suffering from the common and caustic effect of lye poisoning. They kept a reference file on the types of lye poisoning they were seeing. This file led to an inventory, ultimately leading to the Duke Poison Control Center. And more than 600 poison control centers exist today across the United States. Again, an amazing impact. Inspired by these pioneers and many others, we have continued to blaze new directions in education. In the 1960s, a group of leaders saw the need to better prepare students in biomedical research. They drove a change in the MD curriculum, called almost to this day the new curriculum, but it's not longer new, but it persists. It emphasizes critical thinking and evaluation over rote memorization, and provided greater flexibility, earlier clinical exposure, and increased research opportunities. Students in the 1960s began to spend the first year with their core knowledge development, second year their clerkships, and the third year devoted to independent laboratory research projects. This curriculum was so successful, it has endured and stood the test of time, and now is being adapted and adopted by many other institutions. To this day, our MD students complete a compressed first 2 years so they can use the third year for primary scholarship. But what is different is initially it was largely laboratory-based research. Now the scholarship is quite broad, representing all the opportunities and the interests of our students, from traditional laboratory-based research to discovering the excitement in global health, health policy, and really being able to explore and take advantage of all that there is at an institution like Duke. And in fact, many students also use the time to get additional degrees. So let's hear from one of our students about his experience and how it enriches his education.
Right now, my main project is looking at proximal humerus fractures in the elderly and kind of examining different outcomes for that. We are looking at early versus delayed fixations of the humerus fractures. Recently, the abstract was accepted into one of the orthopedic societies, so we'll be presenting it there. I think it's such a unique opportunity because it allows me to see what my life could potentially look like, and it allows me to get involved in the field at such a young age in my career, I guess, which is it's a really awesome opportunity.
So that was Kobiadu Kwarteng. You can see that there's a robust interest in orthopedic surgery, which is part of what our students really look for when they're looking for their third year, which is engaging in research that also matches their clinical interests. So building on our dynamic past, we never stop innovating in education, continue to evaluate our education programs, incorporating new ideas to train the next generation of lifelong learners. For instance, our MD program began the relatively new Patient First curriculum several years ago, which incorporates patient care from the very beginning, with the students experiencing boot camp within the first weeks of arriving here to start to develop hands-on clinical skills. And they've also revised the curriculum to really incorporate and integrate the concepts of basic science with clinical care. And as we continue to innovate, we're weaving artificial intelligence into the fabric to help us make better decisions and free educators from rote tasks. For example, AI tools will help us more efficiently match students with their interests to their clinical needs for their clinical rotations, and will also help improve student assessments. We envision using large language models to summarize assessments from multiple clinical preceptors, highlight high points, flag possible bias. Drawing information from the electronic health record, we're pioneering the use of large language models to analyze differences between student and attending notes. I guess we're assuming the attending note is better than the student note. Is that true, Adite? Identifying missing clinical experiences and highlighting opportunities to enhance training. We aim to revolutionize medical education assessment by offering insights for refining curricula and tailoring personalized learning plans, and we hope this effort will become a national model. This will be the first generation of providers educated in the AI era, and I have no doubt our curriculum will rapidly evolve to meet this opportunity while guiding students to be aware of risks and challenges. So next, let's look at our research history. Our school was focused from the beginning on producing medical advances. After World War II, funding from corporations and foundations fueled most of the early studies here, but after World War II, there was a dramatic expansion of the National Institutes of Health, and a procession of visionary leaders at Duke grew the School of Medicine with the growth of NIH funding, again, keeping us as a top academic institution in the country. Fueled by our founders' trailblazing initiatives, our researchers have never been afraid to take on incredible challenges in science and medicine. So many breakthroughs have happened in the school, in basic sciences, clinical research, and translational research. I'm only going to talk about a few remarkable stories. From the early days, in 1936, Darrell Hart identified airborne bacteria as the cause of post-operative staph infection and devised and tested a successful disinfection system for the operating room using UV light. In 1968, Erwin Friedrich and a graduate student, Joe McCord, discovered an enzyme, superoxide dismutase, which protects all living things against toxicity of oxygen. In 1981, Jane Richardson developed a system for representing the structure of proteins through ribbon diagrams that have become legendary in describing how proteins work. In 1994, our scientists are part of a group that helped apply the discoveries of BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes to understanding susceptibility to ovarian and breast cancer. And of course, in our most recent history, we celebrated our 2 Nobel laureates. Bob Lefkowitz was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2012 for his study of G-protein coupled receptors, which are the target of over 40% of therapeutic drugs today. And in fact, Dr. Lefkowitz's work spans 50 years of Duke history. Paul Modridge was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2015 for his decades of investigation into how cells repair damage in DNA as chromosomes replicate. This provides new insights into the biology of cancer, leading to new therapeutic pathways, and he too is representative of 48 years of Duke's history, which is quite remarkable. But now I'm going to focus on more recent stories. One that actually spans 32 years, and that is the story of impactful medical research. It takes years to take an early laboratory discovery and bring it to the clinic. So, team at Duke recognized that babies with a disease called Pompe disease they were at risk for dying within the first couple of years of life because they lacked a critical enzyme for metabolizing glycogen. This was a glycogen storage disease. Most children in the past with that diagnosis died within the first year of life. In the 1990s, Dr. Y.T. Chen and Johann von Hove began looking for cures for this disease. They conducted laboratory work to make the enzyme that's missing in a form that could be delivered therapeutically. And Priya Krishnani, their colleague and pediatric geneticist, began designing a clinical trial to test this new therapy in 1996 when she was a clinical fellow here. Dr. Krishnani went on the lead with the clinical trial, which began with just 3 babies. The first enzyme treatment was approved by the FDA in 2006, and thanks to that treatment, other treatments have followed, some developed at Duke. People with Pompe disease now live decades longer than they did in the 1990s. And because of Dr. Krishnani's discovery, newborns in most US states are screened for the disease at birth. Patients participating in the first trial came from all over the world and formed lifelong friendships, including these 2 young men shown here. Dr. Krishnani continues to work toward a more sustained cure via gene therapy. Enzyme replacement therapy has to be given on a regular basis. Dr. Chen has fueled further research with a gift to form the Y.T. and Alice Chen Pediatric Genetics and Genomic Research Center, which aims to develop new and effective treatments for patients affected with genetic and metabolic disorders. We are at a transformative time in medicine, and it's difficult to imagine the research questions and medical challenges we can tackle in the future. We know the pace of discovery is going to be remarkable in the next decade, and we know that Duke will lead the way. As with Pompe disease, the future of medical interventions for many conditions will lie in our ability to create new gene therapies or even repair the genome with technologies that are now available, like CRISPR. One of our Duke Science and Technology scholars, Charlie Gersbach, develops these new technologies to modify genomes, epigenomic regulation, and cellular gene networks that play a role in many different genes. I have no doubt he will lead the era of gene editing. As we explore new technologies like these, we are also learning more about the relationship between everybody's genetic makeup and diseases that will affect them later in life. And this effort is being led through our One Duke Gen initiative, led by Swati Shah, who will tell you a little bit about that.
One Duke Gen is a study for Duke patients where we're using genetics and advances in precision medicine to not only discover new things in science, but also to directly improve the health and well-being of our patients. So we're going to take those genetics data and we're actually going to return results. We're going to do it very carefully, but we're going to return results with a team of genetic counselors and clinicians back to our research participants.
So much of our research is, is through sponsored research from a number of agencies, especially the NIH. But a lot of our research starts with an idea, and that idea is generally not supported by sponsored research and is dependent on philanthropy. And we're going to be talking a lot about philanthropy as we approach the active public phase of a capital campaign. But I want to tell you a little bit about Fred and Alice Standback, who are seen here in this picture. They have supported the School of Medicine for decades, particularly in our efforts in cancer and neurodegenerative diseases, particularly Alzheimer's. They have been tireless in their support of our research efforts, and we could not do much of our research advances without the generosity of donors like the Standbacks. So as I mentioned, we're going to be starting a very important public phase of a capital campaign because we know that to be able to move these ideas forward, we really do need that support of our donors, and they love hearing about our stories. Many of you are going to participate in that, and so my charge to you is start thinking about what stories you have to tell as we address our donors. So let's talk a little bit about a patient care mission. Starting with a vision of Duke Hospital as a medical hub for the state, we've built our school into a national leader as an academic, medical, and patient-centered care institution. The hospital opened to patients in 1930 with 4 floors and 416 beds, along with an outpatient clinic, operating rooms, and a teaching amphitheater. In addition to patients directly, the School of Medicine Hospital prepared hundreds of physicians and nurses and other providers who staffed clinics, hospitals, and practices across North Carolina. I don't think there is a town or city you can go to in North Carolina where you don't find Duke-trained doctors. In so many areas of patient care, including epilepsy, cancer, transplant, heart disease, to name a few, the school has really been leaders in innovation and patient care. So let's look at the area of organ transplantation. Dr. Bernard Amos joined the Duke faculty in 1962 as a professor of immunology and experimental surgery. His basic science, spelling out the mechanics of the human immune system, became the cornerstone of the now universal tissue typing system that is used to match donors and recipients for transplantation. This is based on human leukocyte antigens, or the HLA system. As with most patient care innovations, Dr. Amos did not work alone. In fact, his generosity in sharing ideas, data, and samples accelerated the field, and he was known as the godfather of the HLA community. He started a series of workshops that brought scientists from around the world working together and accelerated progress, the first of which was held at Duke as the International Histocompatibility Workshop. So thanks to pioneers like Dr. Amos and many others who came after him, Duke is now one of the top transplant centers in the world. In 2021, Duke surgeons led by Joe Turak and based on research conducted by Louise Market performed the world's first heart and culture thymus transplant for a baby boy from Randolph County, Easton Cinnamon. Born with a heart defect as well as a non-functioning thymus, he received thymic tissue prepared in a lab and injected with antigens that would help him produce and train cells to defend against infection, but not reject his transplanted organ. Tests have shown that the processed thymus is working, baby Easton is thriving, and he's now a toddler. The hope is that he can be completely tapered off anti-rejection drugs, which transplant recipients normally take for life. This landmark procedure has the potential to eliminate the need for anti-rejection medications for all organ transplantations of many different kinds in the future. But looking forward, how does our transplantation innovation carry to the future? So one in particular area is the area of equity. In organ transplantation, limited access to transplant waitlists combined with the scarcity of organ pool results in over 100,000 deaths a year for those that are not eligible or do not get the transplant. Receiving the transplant varies based on race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, as well as many other factors. National data registries of transplant include few social determinants of health with limited reliability. Our own Lisa McElroy and Alan Kirk have formed a national consortium to solve this problem. And we look forward to the future when organ transplants and other advanced procedures are more successful, accessible, and transformative for everyone. Before I talk about our century of excellence in other areas, I want to recognize the recipients of our annual staff awards. We started these awards 2 years ago to recognize our colleagues that are behind everything good that we do. So you'll see their photos here, but I want to tell you just a little bit about each one of them. Bobby Warren is the founding director of the Dirty Lab, which conducts studies to help prevent infections in the healthcare setting. Early in the COVID pandemic, his lab worked to make some notable discoveries of transmission that helped inform our health system to make decisions on how best to respond. Pamela Keels is an administrative director in the Department of Medicine who was praised by her nominators for her intellect, solution-centric thinking, and big picture vision. Tara McNair is a senior lab research analyst in the Department of Surgery who has been instrumental in growing outreach initiatives to reach more underrepresented students as part of the SEEDS initiative. And Shirley Morton is a staff assistant who has contributed to the growth of a research center in the Department of Anesthesiology by assisting faculty, researchers, fellows, postdoc students, and visiting scholars from multiple labs. These staff members represent the excellence, leadership, and dedication we see every day across the School of Medicine, and they are vital to our success. So we have the honor of having Bobby, Pamela, and Tara and Shirley here, so I'd like them to stand up so they can be recognized. Thank you. Now let's talk about community partnerships. Our school and hospital were founded to serve the state. Dr. Davidson, the founding dean, anticipated that the hospital caring for 500,000 people living within 50 miles of Durham, even if they couldn't pay the full bill. Through our relationship with Durham, although our relationship with Durham has not always been perfect, we have built on the vision of continually finding new ways to intentionally partner with our community across all our missions. And we've formalized that community partnership as our fourth mission. So let's look at one example that has an interesting history. In 1971, Dr. Charles Watts founded the Lincoln Community Health Center in Durham. He named as its first executive director Dr. Evelyn Schmidt, an alumnus of both the university and the School of Medicine. She felt she had left Duke and the South after graduation in 1951 because she felt she had received an excellent education, but her political views alienate her from a racially and economically polarized region. Remember, Duke University Hospital was not integrated until 1963 to 1965. After Dr. Schmidt returned to Durham to direct Lincoln, she was the only pediatrician providing care to the many children who visited the center. Dr. Sam Katz, who was chair of pediatrics at the time, reached out to her and offered to help staff the center with pediatric residents. That marked the beginning of an enduring partnership between Lincoln and Duke. Dr. Schmidt turned Lincoln into a national model of community health. She had an appointment in the Duke Department of Pediatrics and directed the Lincoln Community Health Center until she retired. So as we continue to engage with communities that we serve, we often learn from them more than we actually teach. For example, during COVID-19, it became clear that the public health infrastructure was not going to be adequate to meet the many needs of our community. As we worked with our community to fill the public health gaps for testing, vaccination, and education, it became clear that we needed a more robust infrastructure that aligned with state and local communities. One innovation that emerged is our research at Pickett Road Clinic. I think we stood that up in record time, right, Susanna? Months as opposed to years that often these kinds of initiatives take. And it provides a community-engaged clinical research hub for investigators across the school, and is aligned with our efforts to be much more of a partner with our community in our clinical research efforts. The facility brings clinical research into the community and increases community engagement with our research efforts. to help incubate new ideas for promoting equitable participation in clinical research and engaging communities beyond traditional research sites. Traditional research sites is one of the areas of major work within our CTSA, but also within DCRI. So DCRI has created something called iCubed. This clinical research incubator will help researchers turn their ideas into reality to make research more diverse, equitable than ever before. And we're looking forward to hearing more about the future discoveries and the implications for health policy. But let's listen to Mickey Cohen-Wakowitz, who is director of the iCubed initiative.
People want to participate in the clinical research process. They want to not only participate in trials, but they also want to help design them. They want to help in collecting data. They want to disseminate results. And the question for us is, what are the solutions that we're going to develop to make sure that they can do it appropriately and with respect and with privacy?
So looking forward to our future, we want to be even a stronger and deeper partnership with our community that is mutually beneficial. And one of those exciting new initiatives is a partnership recently announced called it was a funding opportunity that is the tripartite collaboration between Duke, Durham Technical Community College, and the Durham Public Schools. This initiative, which was funded by Bloomberg, creates an early college high school experience that will prepare students for careers in nursing, allied health, surgical technology, and clinical research. This is a complete win-win. It's a workforce development that offers amazing, high-paying jobs for members of our community and provides a really well-trained workforce for our health system. Funded by a $29.5 million gift from Bloomberg, these efforts will undoubtedly be mutually beneficial. So today I've shown you just a few examples of how our history has informed where we are today and will inform our future. It is a remarkable history. By and large, one we should be very proud of, but as I mentioned, there are some periods where we need to learn where we didn't do things as well as we could. But building on our strong foundation, our history should continue to inspire us to keep the core values of what started in 1925 and still exists today. That is the integration of our missions to make the world a better place. So with that, I'm going to close with the video that highlights how we do impact the world. And this is what we started last year, the sizzle reel, which looks at how the public sees our work and broadcasts it throughout the country. Here we go.
New at 7, the results of a study by Duke Health just released this afternoon show tumors may be biologically different depending on a person's race.
The triple negative breast cancers may not be the same biologically in all women.
Dr. Brian Eichner gives out free gun locks to parents of his patients and talks about gun safety with his families. He does it because the leading cause of death among young people is guns.
"17 people die every day waiting for transplants."
You order a toothbrush on Amazon and they can tell you minute to minute where that toothbrush is. Well, that's not been possible for organ transplantation, even though we think that what we do is considerably more important.
On the one hand, we want to be sure we're not implying that there are biological races. On the other, we have to be aware of the additional burdens that some populations bear because of their socially defined race.
It's being billed by Eli Lilly as a new bar for weight loss.
Weight loss is hard for our patients with diabetes. And I think in America, we have a lot of stigma about, hey, you need to be able to do this on your own.
Durham Public Schools and Duke University announcing a major partnership that'll help address nursing shortages.
The program could help advance health equity.
More diverse researchers lead to better research results.
Duke University started enrolling patients in a phase 1 clinical trial of the shot.
Foods are much more calorically dense, nutrient poor. You really have to work hard and pay more money to get foods that are healthy.
Dr. Armstrong founded the clinic here, and she helped write the national guidelines for childhood obesity treatment.
I'm going to start chemotherapy at the beginning of February at Duke.
She was able to obtain a complete resection of the tumor without any injury to the back of the brain.
Joining me now is Dr. David Hassan, a neurosurgeon at Duke Health. He recently returned from Rafah and will be going back to Gaza in a few weeks.
Linda, being a human being and a physician, you can't help it but just feel you have to do something, you're compelled to do something.
Dr. Jacob Schroeder, who led the study, suggests using hearts from these donors could increase the pool by 30%.
This is the biggest thing to happen in heart transplants since we really started doing heart transplants.
94% of the patients who got these hearts were alive 6 months later.
An infant underwent a partial heart transplant at just 17 days old, and a year later, he is healthy, doing so well.
In a new study, doctors from Duke Health reporting the boy has functioning heart valves and arteries that are growing with him.
I mean, this was completely uncharted territory.
Mia Love reached out to Dr. Henry Friedman, a neuro-oncologist at Duke University.
I'm trying to cure this thing. It's the first time I ever heard that from a doctor.
The single most important thing we offered her was hope.
Every scan I go through, it's either not growing or it has reduced a little bit.
The therapy strategies using immunotherapy and GBM are getting better, and I think that we're getting to a point now where we're making a meaningful impact on these patients' lives.